that would serve locations that had not been served by those previous applicants, and it would extend those projects, those existing projects, open those up to capture as many additional unserved or underserved locations as possible using those additional funds. So the end result was that we received 2 applications, and we have allocated those funds to those 2 applicants, which are Mavericks Broadband and Sked. So right now there's a challenge window that's been opened up until June 14th. And if you want to check on that challenge process and get any updates, make sure you check our website for additional details. Any questions about CPF or those updates before we move on to BEAD? All right then. So as Brandy alluded to, literally about 7 minutes ago, we received some huge breaking news regarding BEAD. And that news is that the NTIA has officially accepted our Volume 2 proposal. So this is a huge win, something that we have been waiting literally months to learn of and be able to move forward with, and really just opens up a lot of things for things to really start moving very quickly. Brandy, is there anything else you want to talk about related to that news? It's a pretty big day for us.
Yeah, it's a big day. Thank you, Jonas. Yeah, I just want to thank everybody on this call and beyond for all of the help with Volume 2. It was the most extensive document that I think, many of us have ever written, and definitely lots of steps. This will be very complicated but exciting, robust program. And with that, we can actually post our Volume 2 online, which we will do. And we have our comm strategy all ready, and the document is ready to go. We were just waiting for the NTIA blessing, of course. And so very exciting, just unbelievable. And we have 12 months now from this date, I think. We'll verify that, to run our grant process and put our final proposal together. So this time next year, we'll be celebrating by submitting our final proposal to the NTIA. We'll probably submit it a little bit earlier based on the process. So thank you, Jonas, for the airspace, and I'll let you continue.
All right, so let's talk more about what to expect over the next few months when it comes to BEAD. If you look at this slide here, it does a good job outlining of what those expectations are, starting with where we're at now. Kind of starting into June, we're in the middle of our planning phase, which we expect to take up to 65 days. So we have partnered with our new consultant, who is doing a great job drafting the program and compliance guidelines that we expect to follow, really looking at all of the data and analysis, mapping analysis that we have put together up to this point. And they're going through all of that and doing a great job kind of putting together what the program will look like going forward, which takes us into July, which is phase 1. That's the pre-application intake process. There's some new information around this. So before we jump into phase 2, part of phase 2 is a new section that we are opening up, which is the pre-registration window. So how that's going to work is that starting in July, there's going to be an opportunity for applicants to go into the portal and start preparing their application. That means uploading any documents that they would need and working with us to make sure that they have all of the information and resources needed to submit a successful application, so that when that application window opens, which we are expecting at the end of August, early September, they're ready to go. They've had all of their questions answered. They've pre-uploaded anything that they possibly can, so that once that 45 days starts, they've done their homework and everyone is ready to go and submit a successful application. So we're really excited about being able to offer that and work with applicants through that process. But going back to that phase 1 that we're expecting to start in July, we'll start accepting public comments on the project area map and grant guidelines that we're developing now. And then through going into August, we'll start finalizing those project area maps and posting them on the website, which would be 15 days after we receive those public comments. Then there's phase 2. This is the fun part, the application intake process, total of 65 days. The registration window will open. The portal will roll out at the end of August, early September. We'll have webinars on how to apply and make sure that everybody is well informed and has the information and resources needed for that application window to open, like I previously said. And then in October, we'll have the application summary and project areas posted to the website so that everyone knows what things are going to look like with projects. So very exciting things coming along. Things are going to start moving very, very quickly at this point. Any questions about this timeline or what the expectations are around BEAD in the coming months? Okay. I'm going to stop presenting this slide and let's move on to the roadshow. So right now the CBO has kicked off, as of 2 weeks ago, our annual summer roadshow. We kicked it off down south a couple weeks ago in Walsenburg, as well as Avondale, and had a great turnout, about 30 folks combined for those 2 events. And then we'll have 3 more this week and continue our roadshow through August. Everything's been booked so far, all 15 regions, with the exception of 2 that should be finalized here in the coming week. So from now through the end of the summer, end of August, we'll be busy moving around the state, talking with folks. It's a wonderful opportunity for us to really get to the areas of the state that are in the most need and probably don't get enough attention. And I had the experience of going a couple of weeks ago, and it was really great to talk to folks who just, they feel neglected. They feel like they don't have as much of a voice as some of the other areas of the state, to be able to hear their specific challenges to their specific region and be able to offer feedback and opportunities for them to overcome those challenges was a really incredible opportunity for the team. So I'm looking forward to visiting more of those. One of the things we're doing this year is really being specific to the regions that we're visiting. And what that means is when we show up, we're bringing information that is catered to their region, meaning I want to show them, here are the unserved and underserved areas in your region that still need to be addressed. Here's where we've been successful so far. Maybe there's been state funded grants that they've been able to take advantage of. How many locations will that serve? If they had a successful CPF grant, how is that going? What do they still need from us? Has there been an opportunity for them to take advantage of technical assistance where we can help them prepare successful grants? If not, let's talk about how they can take advantage of that. Just really opening up the playbook that the CBO has available for any and all opportunities for these areas of the state to take advantage of what the CBO is currently offering. So first 2 have been great. Really looking forward to the rest of them. Curious to hear your feedback. Is there anything that this group thinks we should be addressing in these roadshow events that maybe we're not thinking of? Anything that you'd like to see if we're coming to your town, what would you like to have addressed? Any thoughts or comments on that? I can tell you so far, some of the feedback we've received has been questions, concerns about, CDOT's fee structure, right-of-way fee structure, concerns about pole attachments, the time that it's taking to get permitting done with the pole attachment make-ready process, as well as some of the costs that are associated with those make-ready engineering plans and pole attachment fees. So that's something that we're looking into, that we're taking very serious and trying to work with the communities and those electrical co-ops on how we can compromise on solutions going forward. Anything else that you guys think that should be addressed in these meetings? Anything at all?
Yeah, I mean, I think touched on it a little bit with sort of CDOT fees, but I think there's a general question about middle mile, as we've talked about before. That again, I think is an important concern to be addressed. So, I think I'd like to see that question addressed as well.
Yeah, I think there's a lot when it comes to middle mile. I can tell you this much: CBO is diving deep into the middle mile challenges and really trying to work with other agencies and communities on what those solutions look like. We're in the beginning phases of that process. There's some really great ideas out there and some incredible opportunities. Obviously, with some of the legislation that was just passed, it's really going to allow the CBO to be a little more empowered with the landscape, the broadband landscape, when it comes to middle mile. So, like I said, we're in the beginning of what we're about to embark on. So there's not a lot of details yet. Brandy, I know you've got some thoughts and ideas about where we're at with middle mile. You want to share some of that?
Yeah, thanks, Jonas. And you're right. Middle mile, Jonas, we're at the beginning stages of this, and we're sort of peeling back the onion, if you will. We've been doing it for the last 30, 45 days to figure out what it is we need to do, how we're going to stage it. And we're working with CDOT and DOLA. And I just want to level set on the expectations around middle mile. A lot of our proposals that we were successful to move forward through this last session, as well as the joint budget committee and our JTC and the General Assembly, those really don't take effect until after the fiscal year. And so we really can't really take action on our policy yet until the fiscal year clock turns over. And so we're using this time to work with CDOT and DOLA on hashing out that plan. And it's not taking longer than I thought it was, because this is a really huge, complex policy issue and infrastructure issue. And, it's going to take us a couple months to figure out what we're doing and how we're going to approach it. And we have to circulate it to leadership too. So to get their buy-in on some of the ideas that we're thinking. So really, we would love to present to this group that is the plan. But it's going to take, I think we're probably the earliest we can really have any sort of conversation about what we're doing is probably August or September, based on all the things that need to happen ahead of time. Because what we don't want to do is we don't want to present something to this group that other agencies haven't even seen yet. So we want to make sure that we want to have a consistent buy-in from everyone, including those that are impacted. So like Project Thor, Region 9 and Region 10, there's a couple of public consortiums for middle mile. They have to be folded into this process. And so we're working on that and we're making progress. I just want to be honest with the expectation around when we can deliver a presentation to this group, because it's a lot bigger than some of the ideas that we've kind of pitched so far, or not pitched, but solicited input from. So we want to make sure we're pretty thorough in our presentation, so you guys have all the information to kind of chime in and help us with some things that we haven't thought of. So I'll stop there. Go ahead, Ralph.
Yeah, I was going to say, irrespective of whatever the plans are, it seems to me there isn't a good understanding of what exists today, where you're starting from, and Eric and I have been discussing. There's a lot of opportunity to contribute to that information and help build that out before any plans get started. So, and I've volunteered my time to help out in that process. So I think that's something that can happen now. Start today.
Okay. Eric, do you want to go?
Yeah, it kind of has to do with Jonas's question of what we'd like to see regionally too, because as of right now, I just wondered when we were going to get that engagement from Region 9 and potentially Region 10, because as far as we can tell, since we're working with them, there hasn't been a lot of talk about how what we've already progress that we've made in southwestern quadrant of the state to address middle mile, how that's getting integrated into the overall plan. And so, I'd hate to have it get to August or September and then receive a plan that we hadn't really even discussed at a regional level. So that's where I guess maybe there's some frustration right now building a little bit that will feel like, yeah, there's things getting decided, but not with a lot of stakeholder engagement, which is what we feel like we're here for.
For sure. Yeah, and I wanted to hear both of you guys before I kind of respond to that. So first, nothing in the state happens today. and so it takes time, and Ralph, I appreciate you volunteering, and we'll definitely take you up on that. Part of understanding middle mile is understanding your current assets, and that is absolutely part of the approach. How the state does that though is to be determined. We haven't decided anything yet. We've been meeting with CDOT. Specifically, Jonas set up a Tiger team within internally to go over what are the steps, like what are the steps that we need to develop or flesh out or or have it become part of our strategies for what we need to do, and part of that is the current state. What are our current assets? Because you're absolutely right. We know some of it, but there's a lot that we don't know. And so we have to conduct that analysis as well, which will take time as well. There's probably the low, medium, and high priority type assessments when you look at current state. The reality is to assess the condition of every single fiber strand that the state has is going to take a lot of time and a lot of money. So it's probably going to be more of a phased approach. But with the idea that we're in the short term, we're prioritizing really high demand areas because that's where we need the fiber today, if you will. But it's going to take some time. It's not that type of assessment isn't going to happen in 30 days. It's not going to happen in 60 days. And I'll be honest, the state, love it or hate it, there's a lot of bureaucracy, and it takes time. I mean, even getting to this point with middle mile, convincing people that number one, we needed a middle mile program, and number two, we need to fund a middle mile program, took the CBO a solid year. And we're still waiting to have the fiscal clock turn over so that we can start mobilizing the resources that we've asked for. And so it's going to take a little bit of time, but we can start to make progress, to your point, by focusing on the higher priority areas. But we need to figure out kind of what we're doing. And then also to your point, Eric, we haven't made any decisions about middle mile at all. The only decisions that we have made in middle mile is that we need FTE to help us. And we need to study the feasibility as well as our current assets and putting our assets on the gaps, I guess you can say, on a 10 to 20 year capital improvement plan. It'll take a lot of stakeholder engagement, and part of our approach is stakeholder engagement. We don't even have an RFP in place for that yet. So we are literally at the beginning stages. So I hear your frustration. I know you guys want to see this now. But the states that actually have successful middle mile programs, so we're looking to Utah and Arizona, they started 20 years ago. And so I share your frustration. I wish there was something we could have done 20 years ago to be in a better space today. But the fact that we actually have prioritized it as state is huge. And so we have a lot to do from here. And with Region 9 and Region 10 and Project Thor, we are meeting with them at the end of this month to start that stakeholdering process of what it is we want for middle mile with these consortiums. What's the long-term, I guess I should say, sustainability plan, because we have to think about that. So we're meeting with a group at the end of the month, June, I think it's June 24th, to go over exactly what you're talking about. And we haven't been engaged in the conversation yet because we didn't have any of our middle mile proposals approved by the state legislature. The governor signed off on the bill 3 weeks ago. And so we had to wait for those things to fall in place. And now we're off to the races. So the reason why you haven't heard anything from us is because we had to wait to see those proposals go through the process. And that's just kind of how it goes. So we're with you. We hear you. It's going to take time. We're literally 3 weeks from when all these laws took effect. We have to wait for fiscal year to turn over to really start our work, but we have started engagement. I mean, Jonas and team are on the summer road show. We're starting the meetings about middle mile. We're going to ramp up a lot on stakeholder engagement around middle mile once we do our procurement for our consultant to help us develop these plans. We haven't made any decisions yet. We don't do that. When I say we're looking at strategy, we're looking at the strategy to start to begin the process for setting up a plan for implementation. And when I mean implementation, I mean getting those, mobilizing our resources so that we can execute on a plan. I'm not talking about the plan itself. I'm talking about what do we need to do to get set up to start the conversation. Those are the decisions we're making today, not what it looks like in the future, because we still have a lot of work to do there. So hopefully that answers your question. Go ahead, Matt.
Yes, thank you. Just to go off of, what Eric was stating, as a county commissioner, I have my concerns. Here recently, we're being asked for, Region 9, Region 10 contributions to be able to tie in the middle mile loop for our Alpine loop. So I hear you loud and clear on the state runs slow. That's government, but I mean, the county governments are maybe a little bit quicker. Obviously, we're much smaller, but we're putting a lot of money into this. So I really want to urge when it comes time for that state to really involve these key stakeholders, because we're putting a ton of money in to accomplish this middle mile gap, at least in Region 9 area, connecting into Region 10, but we're putting a lot of money in, and here soon we're going to be putting in a couple $100,000 just in equipment alone, just for our CNLs. So however we can be a part of this process, because I do not want us as the state as well as county governments to reinvent the wheel here and double pay for a service that we can provide for much cheaper if we all work together and play well in the sandbox.
Yeah, no, it's really great, Commissioner Spilka. And yeah, we want to make sure that engagement is a huge cornerstone of whatever the state's doing with the middle mile. And just based on what I know about the middle mile of the state, it's not going to be a one size fits all. Like to your point, there are regions that are much further ahead than other regions. And there's some regions that don't even want to have, maybe they don't want to have much of a player. They don't want to play in the middle mile space. They want somebody else to do it. So, it's kind of tying in where everybody's at in their middle mile journey and making sure that, number one, the state does the best job that we can to accommodate, folks like Region 10 and Region 9 and Region 12 and sorry, Thor, I say 12, but it's the cog there and they're doing more than just 12. But we want to make sure that we're sensitive to that, and we craft a plan where everybody can coexist in a space that makes sense. And again, it's going to be a phased approach. I mean, when you look at Utah, 20 years of this, and they're crushing it over there. And so they took it off bit by bit, and we will as well. But stakeholdering is so important, and we will make sure that that's top of mind with whatever we're doing. And if we don't get it right, I'm leaning on you guys to let us know if we're missing anybody. You know what I mean? Because sometimes we might, but I don't think we will. But I definitely look forward to that feedback to make sure we're talking to everybody and the right people. Go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, just kind of keying off what you just said, Brandy, and what Commissioner Salko was mentioning. Yeah, one concern that I have going into it is to completely rely on CDOT's priorities for where middle mile are. The reason being is that they have places they need operational fiber where there already might be leasable fiber to the public available, at which point that's not necessarily in the interest of broadband, and even though it may be in the interest of CDOT, since they have their particular kind of fiber that they want to have in the right of way. We ran into that a little bit just in San Luis Valley, going over to Walsenburg, there's already fiber going that direction, or up to Saguache to our east. But also from Delta to Montrose, where there is a fiber on their proposed map, where there also is leasable fiber. So in a lot of cases, it overlaps very well as far as where the lack of it is. Certainly in Wolf Creek, we found that that was the only way that was ever going to get built, and it's the main east-west corridor on the southern end of the state that it had to be CDOT to build, and they needed it, and so did the communities that it bisects. But in other cases, there's not going to be a complete overlap, or the CDOT right-of-ways won't completely get to everywhere that you need to go. So I think there's a lot of overlap, but it's not completely just their priorities equal the priorities of broadband middle mile in all respects. And I just want to put that out there.
Yeah, well, I think that goes back to balancing the different agencies, just because it's the same as the different regional stakeholders. We have to develop a middle mile strategic plan that incorporates all of this feedback and everybody's interest in middle mile. So it won't be overwhelmingly, this is CDOT's priority and this is a priority that shall govern the land, right? Like, there's other people, there's other players, there's industry, there's local governments, nonprofits that have a interest in middle mile. And so we have to put that in a plan. And I think this conversation it really elevates the need for a middle mile strategic plan, because you have needs, the Middle Mountains, Region 12, Thor, they have needs. You have the Eastern Plains, you have the Denver metro area, Northern Colorado, we have, far south, southeast corner, and everybody's needs are different, right? And so we have to bring all of those needs together into one place and really put a strategy around how we implement those, and making sure that it's as fair and balanced as it can be. I mean, CDOT does have transportation needs, and they need things for their right of way and the fiber deployment, just like you do. So we need to capture all of this feedback and put it into a strategy that makes sense, that we can actually pitch to the General Assembly, because some of this stuff to implement, it's going to require laws. It's going to require funding. It's going to require resources that we can't even contemplate yet. And so until we have a cohesive strategy that we're tying all this together, we're just going to have the same conversations. And so, we're really motivated to solve for that. But that's the first step. That's the first step in the process, is getting that and documenting it. So we're with you. It's just we can't do this overnight. It's going to take 6 to 9 months to set this up, and that's just the reality. That's the way things are going. I mean, even with BEAD, it took 2 years to get to an approval today. Like, that should, and I laugh because I would cry if I wasn't laughing, but that's just the reality of it. But we'll get there, and I appreciate your patience and everybody's patience around this, because it's a really complicated program. We're really excited to be on this journey. It's one of those pioneer projects that you get to come across sometimes with the state, and this is a big deal for everybody. So we'll get it done with a lot of stakeholder feedback. Eric, do you want to go again?
I just had a follow-up on that, which is like, I was going to say, I realized that timing wise, when you especially when I know the CBO existed before you were there, Brandy, but I know that as soon as you got in the position is when all this money and all these programs with deadlines for CPF and the middle mile fund for NTIA and BEAD all kind of came down, and that's really driven. We realize that your priority list of having to respond to these projects and programs that had their own set of huge gargantuan sets of plans that you had to put together. It's too bad that the middle mile wasn't considered by the national level first, so they could put that to each state, because I think it's a little bit of the cart getting put before the horse, but that's not your fault. That they really did need to consider the middle mile, especially in the Western United States first, before they could effectively determine how to reach each of these areas with CPF and BEAD. And so that's where it's a little bit of the conflict is coming up, is that, of course, you didn't have a chance to do that. And we realize that. But going forward, it's good to see that you're looking at it. I want to give a +1 for UDOT. From everything that I have heard from even the fiber leasing director from UDOT, who I've exchanged emails with, and other providers, it works very well for both sides, and they do kill it. And anything we can do to model what they're doing, I would say yes, let's do that, because they're very similar state to ours and similar topography and similar density. So thanks for that.
Yeah, UDOT is the model. That's what we're looking towards, Eric. And yeah, and I try not to go down the to-do list with the CBO when I'm talking about programs and priorities. I mean, middle mile to me is just as important as all the other ones. And I do agree. I think it's unfortunate that we're prioritizing last mile without middle mile, because, I mean, common logic, you kind of need one. You can't have one without the other. But I also understand the Fed's hesitation with funding middle mile, and it was kind of explained to me when I was advocating for, why this way? Why are we jumping to last mile? And the Feds have funded middle mile for years. They have funded it, and it didn't result in what I think they had wanted. There's a lot of, and there's a lot of taxpayer funded dark middle mile that it is closed access and nobody can access it, and those were, and I'm not, it's just, they didn't want to do that again. Now I feel like they probably could have funded middle mile, but maybe changed the rules. But I don't know if they had the political will to do anything remotely similar to what's been done. So that's why they chose this path, and that's the way it was explained to me. I don't think it's bad. I do think it is cart before the horse. So we're going to have to really be creative in our program for how do we solve for middle mile when it doesn't exist. But ultimately, I think the Feds are leaving it to the states to fund. And that's my honest professional opinion. And when you look at UDOT, that is all state money. That's not federal funding. So, and they're crushing it. We want to be like them, but we'll get there. It's going to take time, and we have a really good model. So maybe we can save ourselves a few years, right? and really take their lessons learned and avoid them and set Colorado up really well. So we're there. We're with you, and we're gonna do it right. But yeah, it's a little cart before the horse. So on the middle mile piece, I know we got a little off. I don't want to say off track, but on a side track, if you will. We just won't be ready to present something to this group until we get on the same page internally with what we're doing, and going down to the west over to Montrose and talking with our stakeholders that are have the big consortiums. But we really need to be methodical and figure this out, and no decisions have been made, but we need to start there, and then hopefully in the next 2 or 3 months we'll have something solid for you guys to look at after we share it with leadership as well. So it's coming. I know it's not coming fast enough, but we're there. We're working on it behind the scenes weekly. So we'll have something soon. Anything else on the summer roadshow, Jonas?
No, we're wrapped up with Summer Roadshow.
Okay.
So I think
All right,
that takes us to legislation. Yeah. Paige,
Okay.
you want to talk to us about legislation? Good afternoon,
Yes.
by the way.
Good afternoon, Jonas. Yeah, my name is Paige Osmond, Senior Policy Advisor supporting the Colorado Broadband Office. So the session adjourned May 8th. So that means we're approaching the 30-day clock for the governor to sign bills so they can become laws. We're still metabolizing and taking in bills that have passed. These do include the broadband ones, HB 24-1234, HB 24-1334, and HB 24-1336, which have all been signed by the governor. So the next steps, we're just planning on these, and we'll have those soon for those bills. And in the coming months, we're just going to start with the cyclical process of planning for the legislative session for 2025. And we're always happy to engage with stakeholders on legislative matters. So at any time, please reach out to myself or Michael McReynolds, OIT Senior Government Affairs Manager. I did want to note that the June 5th Joint Technology Committee meeting, that has been postponed until Monday, July 8th at 9 a.m. The agenda has not been posted yet, but once it does, we'll let you know, and we'll let you know if there's a broadband update. And happy to take any questions.
If there's no questions on legislation, so we have several deliverables for 1336. And we'll be sharing those with you guys through the summer. We have to publish our grant guidelines. We have to start working on those. And just so you guys know, the approach there is we have a lot of really great grant guidelines that we've developed as a result of the Broadband Deployment Board, CPS, and now BEAD will be publishing those for public comment in July. Our approach isn't to start writing those grant guidelines until our BEAD grant guidelines are done. Because what I want to do is I want to try to get some consistency across the programs, if you will. It might be a little difficult because each one's different, but we'll have all of our guidelines in place so that we can just, copy and paste, tweak, and so forth. So we're not reinventing the wheel with this program. And so we'll be sharing some of our philosophies and strategies around what we're thinking with the 1336 deliverables, so that we're ready to meet that deadline at the end of the year. And so we're pretty excited about that. We don't know yet what the schedule looks like, if we're gonna do another grant round for BDEB or not. We don't know what our deposits look like. Quite honestly, we have a lot of work to do, so we might just prioritize on getting the next iteration of the program developed and stood up. So, but when we have some stuff for you guys, we'll talk about it. But we want to make sure that we're moving along on that side. So that's where we are with that. Okay. If there's no questions on legislation, is there anything else that people want to discuss for today's meeting? I kind of left this open. I know we talked a lot about Middle Mile again. We'll be ready for you soon, but we have a few stones to overturn first before we kind of figure out where we're going to land on next steps with Middle Mile, waiting for this fiscal year to turn over, mobilizing our resources. And then we also have to even within the Broadband Deployment Fund, we now have a Middle Mile program established for that, a funding mechanism. It's a far cry from what Utah invests in, but the idea is to make sure that funding continues for our partners, local government, industry on Middle Mile. DOLA's done a heck of a job over the last 10 to 12 years with the Middle Mile program, but we're looking to come in and sort of help them out with that piece, if you will, on the infrastructure side, because it's still a very, very popular program, and DOLA gets broadband grants every cycle from what I understand. So that's where we are. So are there any other discussion items before we hang it up, or if there's anything else you want to see at the next meeting in July? Rick?
Just a clarification, I don't believe that they're doing the broadband set aside for EIAF anymore in DOLA. It's still available. They may still fund it. In fact, we've got one that's out there right now for Region 9 for that equipment that Commissioner Salko mentioned. But I think we're competing with every other DOLA kind of project category these days, and so the days of the $5 million set aside may be over. I'd love to see them come back, because it's nice to only be competing against one category when you're asking for it, but as of right now it doesn't seem like it is.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Eric. We had some conversations with DOLA last year, and we looped them in on what we were doing to because they've always wanted CBO to take that over, because CBO is the source on broadband for the state. We weren't in a place before now to really do it. And so thank goodness for DOLA. But the idea is that this creates another opportunity to have dedicated Middle Mile funding that doesn't compete with all the small water systems, sewer systems, and everything else facilities across Colorado that local governments request funding for. So this will be another tool in the toolbox for our communities, so that DOLA can continue on with funding what it funds, and then that dedicated program is still there. So we are effectively taking not money, because we're not going and we're not raiding their refrigerator and they're not raiding ours, but we have set aside that money for that. And actually, if the deposits stay stable, we should be able to see a little bit more money allocated. We receive about $14 million a year, and so 60% of 14 is, I don't know, any math whizzes on the line that can do that in their head. All right, 8.4 million. So it's even more than what DOLA was setting aside for miles. So yeah, so we'll have that available for folks, and it's dedicated, so we're not losing that as a resource to our community. Anything else before we wrap up? Great. Well, we'll wrap up early. We'll give you a few minutes left back in your day. Thank you guys so much for your patience and for joining us today. We'll go ahead and send this out, the recording and everything that we do. So next month we should have a little bit more to talk about, because we're in the thick of Embiid right now. So, and if we can provide anything on Middleman, if we feel like we're in a good place, we absolutely will. But we're not looking to August or September before we can really come up with something that covers all the bases. So, but anyway, thank you guys so much. We'll talk to you soon, and have a good rest of the week. Thanks. Bye.